The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, good afternoon and welcome to Nonprofit Finance Fund's webinar on the state of the nonprofit sector survey. We are so happy that you've joined us for today's session, Data for Change, 2018 Results and Overview. Today's webinar will be presented by Anthony Bug-Levine, the CEO of Nonprofit Finance Fund, and Barbara Rosen, the Vice President of Knowledge and Communications here. To briefly introduce myself, my name is Jung In, and I'll be facilitating today's session. Before we get started, I'd like to share some housekeeping items. First, this webinar is being recorded, so everyone is muted to ensure high sound quality. Though everyone is on mute, we would still love to answer your questions. You can send in your questions at any time by typing them into the chat box located near the bottom of your GoToWebinar panel. I'll be able to respond to you via chat, and then I'll relay your questions to the presenters during our question and answers section that's towards the end of the webinar. Next, within 24 hours following the conclusion of the webinar, you will receive a link to the recorded session of today's webinar, as well as the PowerPoint slides. Thanks again to all of you for joining us. Thanks again for joining us to the State of the Nonprofit Sector Survey. And then I will hand it off to Anthony to begin.
Thanks so much, Jung-In, and thank you everyone who's taken the time to join us for this webinar today. I realize that it's a time in our country and for a lot of our work where we are all busier than ever and compelled by the social issues we work on in a way that we'll talk about how the data really shows that none of us are operating in isolation, and we're all operating under conditions of a lot of stress and concern. And certainly that's very present for all of us around the country now, given on the situation that's happening on our border. And some of the organizations who are participating in this survey, I know you are actively working on those issues as well. Whatever your politics are, I think we can all agree that what is happening is illustrating so clearly that to be the society we want to be, we are going to have strong nonprofits whose concern is for sort of the missions and their clients and as a priority. And really this conversation today is not so much about the data, although the data is helpful. It's really what can we all be doing with this data and as a community to create the conditions in which the work we do and the missions we serve can be strengthened. And that's really the theme of this today, is sharing what you all said when we asked the community of nonprofits around the country, what is the state you're in and what should people know about the conditions you're under. That's what the survey data reveals, but it really is, we hope, the beginning of a conversation that many of you can be having with your own staff, with your clients, with your supporters, with people in government, so that this data can be the basis for strengthening our ability to operate as a sector and as individual organizations. So we will, throughout the presentation today, talk about how other organizations have been using this data, and at the end, really focus specifically on what we hope that the people on this call will be able to do with the work we've done. We don't think of this as a survey. We've come to appreciate that it's really it's an opportunity for a community to organize and have its voice be heard, and that's something that we've always come to appreciate is what the survey is about. There are more than 800 people signed up for this call, and more than 3,000 people who participated in providing information for the survey. So this really is a community effort. And again, just wanted to start by saying thank you to all of you who have participated in this community organizing effort, whether it is by providing the data or even just participating in this call and thinking creatively with us about how you can be using this resource in order to pursue your work. Before we get into the data, I just wanted to talk a little bit about Nonprofit Finance Fund. Some of you are our clients. Great to have you on board. Others might be unaware of what we do. We are a nonprofit organization ourselves. We have been in existence for 38 years and really focus on providing three services. We offer investments. We are lenders to many of you on the call and organizations around the country, and make investments across a range of sectors where our loans can enable nonprofits to achieve their potential in delivering on their missions. We also have a national consulting practice that helps nonprofit organizations develop the capacities to manage in a way that is resilient, enables our clients to maintain and expand their services in their communities. And then finally, we learn what we can from the work we do with these incredible nonprofits around the country into a set of insights that we hope are going to be relevant and accessible and powerful for the many people around the country whose we don't get to work with directly. Our primary clients are nonprofits and the people who fund them. I know we have some funders on this call as well as some people from government. It takes all of us working together effectively to get the hard work of the nonprofit sector done, and that's something that we're very privileged to be able to do. As a mission-driven organization, we come to work every day to serve a mission, but we realize we only get to do that when our clients do the great work that you all do in the communities you serve. So again, a real honor for those of you we get to work with directly and those of you who we can support indirectly through initiatives like this survey. In terms of the survey itself, this was a project that we launched in 2009 in the wake of the financial crisis, when a lot of people around the country were wondering what the financial crisis was going to mean to the stability of nonprofits. I think there was a lot of concern at the time that private donations would come down at the same time that governments would cut back and that many nonprofits would be left in a position of crisis. And so we felt that at the time it was important, rather than having other people decide for nonprofits what we were going through, to actually be able to have us tell our own story. And so the survey was really born out of the spirit of saying that the nonprofit sector should be able to have its own voice. And that questions concerning what we're going through and what we're experiencing is something that we should be able to weigh in on ourselves. And that was really the spirit in which this survey was born. Since then, we did it annually for a while, and this is the first time we've done it in 3 years. And it really has become, as we say on this slide, a collective megaphone, a way for the nonprofit sector to raise our voices together and be able to say that what we are going through is not just something that is the result of our unique circumstances, but in many ways is something that we are experiencing as a field together. This has been used in a wide range of ways in terms of individual organizations that have used the survey to help understand the context in which they operate. It's also been effective in a range of policy debates, and we'll talk later on about how this survey has been used and how we encourage you to use it in having conversations with local government and other funders as well. And then ultimately, as I said, it's become more than just a collection of data. It really has become a community organizing effort. And I want to thank our funders. Bank of America Foundation has been a very loyal funder of this every time we've done this. Those of you who work in the area of advocacy and knowledge know how hard it is to find funders who value this kind of resource. It's as hard as it is to raise money to deliver our programs, it's even harder to find funders who see value in not just the delivery of programs, but in this kind of effort to understand and raise our collective voice. And so it's been a community effort that is organized around our funders, as well as more than 100 partners, a lot of state nonprofit associations, some of whom are on the call today, have helped us with outreach, a very good partnership with groups like GuideStar and others. It really takes a huge effort to get very busy people around the country to share not only the data that you're going to see, but also thousands of comments that help provide color and a very personal understanding of what these numbers mean in the day-to-day operations of your organizations and what it means for the clients you serve. So with that background, I just wanted to get to the high-level findings of what we have learned from the survey this year. And afterwards, my colleague Barbara will take you through the data that underpins these high-level findings. I think as you can see from the slide, it's nothing new to say that nonprofits face a familiar challenge. And the familiar challenge we all face is that the needs in our communities exceed the resources we have to serve them. That is true this year. It's been true every year we've done the survey. The demand for services is still rising. It's not just that there's unmet need, it's that need appears to be rising and only getting worse. And when we ask nonprofits what are the top challenges, as is typical, achieving financial sustainability, both in the short and the long term, and raising funding to cover the full cost, not simply to have a funder who says, we'll give you just what you need to get by in delivering your programs, but raising funding that can allow us to get out of the hamster wheel of always just barely getting by and never being able to invest in the organization in a way that would allow you to build a more effective and resilient organization. We did notice an increasing focus on racial inequity, and not surprising given what's been happening in our national politics, a growing awareness of and a willingness to commit to advocacy as a central part of the work. And again, that's not about partisan politics. It's just about the great threat that many of our funding sources are under, as well as what our clients are experiencing. We don't see this necessarily as a depressing story. Again, the idea that nonprofits are always working hard with limited resources is something we're used to. We were really struck by and heartened by a theme that emerged not only from the data, which certainly does convey a sense of resilience in the sector, but also, again, from the thousands of comments we received that despite these challenges, despite the fact that there's a lot of headwinds that organizations and their clients are facing, the nonprofit sector is not stepping back and not giving up. Many organizations are expanding programs, not cutting them. You are committed to measuring impact, thinking about the future, partnering in new ways. So we were really struck by a sense that came out through this process that gave us a lot of optimism at a time. I think we all could use some, that this is a sector that's resilient, not going away and not backing down from a hard challenge. I don't think we ever have. That's not who we are as a sector. And it's certainly verified in the data that it's not happening now. One thing we did pick up this time, differently than the past times we've done this survey, is a worry not just for our own organization's health, but for the people we serve. Even if we're able to provide the programs that we believe are effective, many of us are recognizing that the clients we serve are increasingly vulnerable and threatened. Affordable housing is a major reason why in whatever sector you work in, even if you're not necessarily focused on that as a major issue. We found that across sectors, whether it's education or health or other sectors, when we asked you all what is the issue that most threatens your clients, the ability to acquire and maintain affordable housing came out prominently more this year than ever before. And then finally, 2/3 of all the respondents said that the federal government is making the challenges of clients worse rather than better. And that's not about budget cuts. It's about all the other ways in which we, as a society, seem to be, to some degree, abandoning a sense that we have a commitment to our most vulnerable citizens, many of whom you all work with, and a sense that whether it's the federal government's actions through policies or a tone that is being set by the federal government, it's simply making it harder for the people we serve to carve out a path for their own lives that is one of dignity and stability. So a mixed message. We are facing typical challenges. We're not backing down in the face of them, but we also realize that in many ways, things are getting worse for many of our clients. And so I'm going to hand it over to Barbara, who's going to get into the details. Just to reiterate what Jong-In said at the beginning, you don't need to take screenshots and maniacally write down any of this data. It's all available. It's all available for free. And this particular PowerPoint will be sent to you if you registered over email, or just email us directly if you want to find another way. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Anthony. So as Anthony mentioned, I'm going to walk us through some of the real headlines in the data. Again, I can't stress enough, this is really just one slice. There is so much more data, and it's all available to you. It's free of charge. If you go to nff.org/survey data, you can explore it. You can filter it by geography, by organization size. You can customize and download graphs to use in your own presentations. So please check out the database. If you can't find something, just email survey@nff.org and we would be happy to help you. So, excuse me, in the realm of unfortunately chronic challenges, the situation with demand and need just hasn't changed. This has been the story for many, many years, that demand keeps growing faster than our collective ability to meet it. This picture is worse in low-income communities. So you'll see that 83% of nonprofits who are serving low-income communities saw demand grow in 2017, and only 37% of them were able to meet it. And what this picture means is we have an awful lot of people, an increasing number of people with basic needs that aren't being met. So also in the realm of chronic challenges, we asked survey respondents, nonprofit leaders, to name the top 3 financial or operational challenges, and the top 3 staffing challenges facing their organizations. I don't think you're going to find many things, if any, on this list surprising. The most cited financial or operational challenges, as Anthony mentioned, are achieving financial sustainability, raising funding that covers full costs, raising unrestricted revenue. We have been really heartened by increasing numbers of funders who really are starting to get the critical importance of providing full cost and unrestricted funding, but we still, as a sector, got a long way to go. A recurring theme also, especially when you look at the staffing challenges, is the human capital is a major concern and continues to be. The challenge of getting, and finding and getting and paying enough to keep not only enough hands, but hands that are qualified to do the work that we need them to do. You'll see, again, the top cited staffing challenges are offering competitive pay, employing enough hands to do the work, and building our next generation of leadership. We asked a number of open-ended questions in this survey, and we got some amazing stories from respondents, and we'll be sharing a handful of them today. There are many more on the website, and we have more also if anybody is interested in exploring any further quotes. This particular comment from the leader of a human services nonprofit in New Hampshire really encapsulates what we heard from a lot of people about staffing challenges. I'd like to read it to you. They said, funding constraints which lead to low wages make it very difficult to hire staff. We are competing with fast food chains and retail stores, but our staff have far more responsibility, administering medications, assisting with personal care, providing transportation, helping with job skills and mental health issues, and they work under much more stressful conditions than those who flip burgers or ring up sales. And as Anthony said, we were incredibly heartened and not surprised to see that nonprofit leaders, all of you, are stepping up to meet all of these chronic and new challenges with characteristic determination and creativity. We are not seeing anybody retrenching. We're not seeing anybody saying, we can't do this, we're going home. We are seeing forward motion, an unwavering commitment to take what we have and do what we can with it. Organizations are expanding their programs and services. More than half, 52% in 2017, and 63% said they plan to do it this year. They're expanding compensation. 55% did so in 2017, and almost half plan to do so in 2018. They are increasing headcount. Again, 54% in 2017, almost 50% plan to do so this year. And they're increasing the diversity of their leadership and staff. 44% in 2017, 60% plan to do so in 2018. Organizations are thinking and acting strategically. We were really, really impressed with the number who cited collaboration in the actions they took and planned. It was 68% in 2017, 68% of organizations plan to collaborate or partner in 2018. Organizations are doing succession planning. A quarter, 24%, said they were in 2017, and 45% said it's on the list for 2018. And as we were really pleased to see that folks are investing in impact measurement software. It may not seem like a priority to some people, and we know it's absolutely critical in showing the results that we need to get in our communities. 28% of respondents said they did in 2017, 38% said they plan to invest in more impact measurement software in 2018. And further on the same subject, it was absolutely great to see so much progress toward an outcomes orientation and impact measurement. We all need to be focusing on and funding the results that we all want to see. So here you'll see the things that nonprofit leaders said their organizations are doing. In addition to investing in impact measurement software, they're using data to make decisions. And we also were very happy to see the growth in nonprofits' plans to pursue outcomes-based funding. So much of our sector's funding is still based on outputs and activities, and it incentivizes a short-term focus. NFF really believes and is working toward advancing a shift towards outcomes-based funding models. It's the difference between paying a shelter for the number of beds filled every night versus paying for the number of clients who transition into permanent housing. Our funding systems really need to change so nonprofits can work towards and achieve these kinds of long-term progress. We really welcome the small but growing awareness of the need to give our organizations the ability and the resources to focus that way. As many of you know, this is a subject dear to our hearts here at NFF. We recently partnered with the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco on a national dialogue about what this kind of systems reorientation will entail and what kinds of investments will be needed so that nonprofits can capture and analyze and communicate the impact of our work. We published a book that is a compilation of many, many expert perspectives from across sectors, across geographies, looking at many forms that outcomes orientation can take and many ways it can be funded. The book is free in both hard copy, and you can also read or download it from the campaign's website. There will be a link at the end of this presentation. And the survey showed how much you all are just making it work. 76% of responding nonprofits managed to finish 2017 at break even or better. Half ended 2017 with a surplus. Only 29% had budgeted for a surplus at the start of the year. That is that half, that 50% is the highest number we've ever seen since we started conducting the survey. The other chart on the right side of the slide shows nonprofits' cash on hand. This is always kind of a jaw dropper for people outside of our sector. Realizing how little cash on hand we collectively have, it's an awakening moment. Here's a fun fact for you. The 2017 results picture was even better among nonprofits with more than 6 months of cash on hand. So more of them, 33% of them planned for a surplus and 64% achieved one. So as Anthony mentioned, this survey is about building community, and it is so much about raising voices. We really had a big focus this year on raising voices in nonprofit leaders' own words. We included a number of open-ended questions that we've mentioned. We've shown you one or two. The answers are just so compelling and so insightful. We are working very hard to analyze and share this more qualitative data as well as the quantitative data. Just thought we'd show you this one. I particularly love the sort of confident, competent tone of this. So this was a particularly challenging and interesting year to try to capture. In addition to our time-honored questions about financial health and operational health and challenges, we really wanted to try to understand and add some data to ground the anecdotes we were hearing about how our sector is responding to what is really, in many ways, an unprecedented year for the sector and for the country. And one in which we saw the country's racial divides ripped wide open. So we added some new questions. We added questions about organizations' focus on racial inequity, questions about their leadership diversity. We also asked how organizations have been impacted last year by the federal government's actions and words. This is what Anthony was mentioning earlier. We wanted to capture both sentiment and actual policy changes or uncertainty at that point. This is 2017, so realize that a lot of decisions have not yet been made. I don't think you'll be surprised to know that most organizations said that their funding and policy environments were made harder. The thing that was really, really striking to us was that more than 2/3 of respondents said the federal government had actually increased the challenges facing their clients, that actually made their clients' lives harder. There were very, very deep concerns voiced, notably about immigrants, about the LGBTQ community, people of color, low-income communities. Don't think you'll find any of this surprising, but it was very raw, and you'll see this in the comments. Again, we see a picture of you all rising to meet these challenges. Organizations are doing more formal advocacy and policy, and 64% of our respondents said that their organizations address racial inequity, and half of that group said the focus grew in 2017. So when you look at the actual specific needs that nonprofit leaders cite in their communities, as Anthony mentioned, affordable housing was far and away at the top of the list. It was at the top of the list in urban, suburban, rural communities in 48 states. And we heard a lot in the written comments about the impact of this challenge on both clients and staff. The next three most frequently cited challenges came pretty much grouped together. Organizations are seeing a critical need for more youth programs and services, more services in mental and behavioral health, and greater financial capability. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Anthony.
Great. Thanks, Barbara. And as I said earlier, we have really what I hope is useful data, and you've seen the charts that Barbara has been sharing. You've also been seeing the quotes we've come up. These are all quotes we received when we asked people to fill out more open-ended questions. And again, I think the way we hope the survey is helpful for you is both as a resource for some of the data that can persuade some people, as well as a place to find quotes like the ones on these pages that really help to make more human what the data is telling us. And just to reaffirm what Barbara said, there is a real concern for what is happening around the country in red states and blue states to the vulnerable communities who are increasingly being left out and marginalized in our national politics, and how that's now landing with the way that individuals and groups are being treated. Not going to read these here again. I think we'll send these, and we have many more quotes like this. But again, a real just sense that came out of this of the nonprofit sector recognizing a threat. That's not just about funding streams. It's really about the place in which our work and the people we serve and the respect that with which they're held. The quote on the top right-hand corner from a nonprofit in North Carolina, really struck me that it's not about specific policies necessarily. It's this broader sense that poor people, being poor is being blamed on the poor and not on so many other structural conditions that are around people's lives. And so we believe that this for us it's a call to all of us in the community to do what we can, not only to secure our own organizational interests, but to put our voices alongside those who are fighting for our country to be a place in which all people's lives are treated with respect, and that the actions we take are ones that recognize that all people have an equal claim to dignity. It's something that we take very seriously at NFF, despite the fact that our work can be quite technical. And we hope that the survey helps those of you who share that sentiment to recognize that you're part of a bigger community that can really come together around that idea. As Barbara said, there's a lot more than just what we presented today. And so wanted to just spend a bit of time now before we take questions. And once again, we've been getting some great questions through the chat function. Please do write in your questions, and we'll try to get to as many as we can once we're done with the presentation. But did want to say that we really don't treat this as an NFF survey. We treat this as a community coming together to create a resource for the community. And so really hope that you're going to take away from this survey some data that's useful. And just wanted to give you a few highlights of how other organizations like you have been using this, are already using it this year and have been using it in the past. The first is helping to understand the context in which you operate. Running a nonprofit organization, especially one that has struggles to become resilient in your business model, can often feel lonely. We know from our clients that sometimes you end up worrying that you as a leader of a nonprofit are doing something wrong, that there must be something that you could be doing differently to get out of this desperate sense that you're not able to meet the community needs, that the resources you have are not enough to get the job done. If nothing else, we hope that this survey really provides a context that allows you to realize you are not alone, that we are all operating in a crazy system that doesn't allow many of us to get done what we need to get done and really forces us into a habit of getting by. So there's specific ways in which you can use the survey to help understand the context you're in. Compare your organization or the grantees, for those of you who are funders, to peer organizations either working in the same sector or in the same geography. The survey website allows you to go in and filter the results based on organizations from specific states or operating specific sectors, large organizations, small organizations, those that serve low-income people, those that don't. So it's easy for you to find that subset that most reflects who you are, and then allow you to see what your peers are saying about the conditions that they face and how that compares to the national sample. We also think this has been proven by many nonprofits to be a very useful way to open up a conversation. It can be a great starting point for a discussion about your organization and your future, rather than an ending point that describes what's happening externally. So we encourage you to share some of the most relevant data points with your next board meeting, with your staff, with some of your funders, simply as a way to talk about, well, these are issues that are important to other organizations. What are we doing to get more funding that's orienting around outcomes? What are we doing to support the advocacy work that other people increasingly feel are important, and so forth? It also can be a very useful way to talk about the community needs that go beyond your specific mission. You might have a mission that's focused on specifically providing high quality after school programs for kids in your community. But what are the broader challenges that they and their families are facing? Using the data from your peers answering that question can be a helpful way to spark a conversation about what is happening to your clients beyond the window that you see them through. We encourage you also to run the survey yourselves. It's kind of a fun exercise to have people in your organizations, your supporters, or your board fill out the questions so that you can get alignment about where you think your organization is. The question about financial stability, the concern, how concerned are you about long-term future? Those are all questions that sometimes provide a surprising range of answers when you ask people the same organization. So if you would like to give the survey yourself to your own staff or your supporters as a way to get a sense of how aligned you are about your own organization, we encourage you to email us, and we're happy to send you a version of the questions that allows you to effectively run the survey yourselves. Again, with all of this, all we ask is that if something interesting comes up and you learn something useful, please do share it with us so that we can share it with the rest of the community. We do find that this can be a useful inspiration. As I said, beyond the numbers themselves, some of the testimony that came in can be incredibly heartening. It can also be quite devastating, but in the devastation, it's sometimes good to find solidarity and realize that what you are encountering running an elder care agency in Kansas might not be that dissimilar to someone running a similar agency in the Bronx. And I think it sometimes is helpful to recognize the larger community we are a part of when we are all so focused on the day-to-day of just trying to get through. As I said earlier, this has been a powerful tool for advocacy. We are very proud of the fact that in the last administration, when the Offices of Management and Budget gave a new mandate that all recipients of federal grants had to increase to a minimum of 10% the amount of overhead that they were able to pay your organizations for the work you did. This survey data was used in testimony on Capitol Hill in Washington to help the administration understand why it was the case that that was needed. Before, many members of Congress and people in the government who we've spoken to said, we never knew that our contracts didn't pay the full costs of the services you deliver. We didn't know that many of you operate with such small reserves, and therefore delayed payments are such a challenge to you. Simply allowing this data to help people understand the challenges that you operate on has proven to be effective in making the case for reforms to how the government funding operates. Similarly with private foundations, sharing with your funders some of the data about the way that other organizations are being treated and the effect it has is sometimes a more powerful way than simply saying, here's what we need as an individual organization. You can use the voice of the 3,400 to support your work. We're also excited to say that as we speak right now, one of my colleagues in the Nonprofit Finance Fund's New York office is testifying at a meeting of our New York City City Council alongside our partner, our Human Services Council here in New York. And again, simply bringing the data and the objective facts of many voices to make a powerful argument for the kinds of reforms we need to see so that the money that is spent by government can be ultimately more effectively turned into both short-term outcomes for the clients you serve as well as resilience for the organizations that our government funds over time. Finally, we do encourage you to use this to explore the dynamics of nonprofits in the areas you work. You can add data to, if you're an academic, if you're trying to help educate people about the nonprofit sector. This allows you to add some real data to what is often projected as assertions about the way the sector works. You can really bring some facts to bear. As our CFO likes to say, it's a great way to bring facts to what is typically a word fight. So encourage you to use the survey in that way. Again, we'd love to hear from you. If you do use the survey in that way, let us know what worked. And if you find other ways to use the survey, then again, please do share that with us so that we can share it with the community and just galvanize this community to come together and make what is a pretty large and substantial effort to continue with this work. So finally, as I said, the survey data itself is available at nff.org/survey data. That's where you will find the raw data. You will find the filters. I'm really proud of the NFF team who this year have invested in making the visual display of this information more compelling and less wonky. We get very fascinated with data, but we realize that what's going to be most helpful for you is to have this be able to be compelling and presentable to all of the people you need to influence and help educate who aren't as fascinated by nonprofit data as we are. So we've really tried to make this a visually compelling interface. And again, the data is all free and available for you to filter. So we encourage you to play with the data at survey data, as well as go to the general survey page, nff.org/survey, where you will, in addition to the data, find a lot of the coverage, as well as some of the op-eds we've written, where we have taken this data and tried to use it to make the case for mutually beneficial reforms in how our nonprofit sector is funded over time. If you have any other questions, please do email survey@nff.org. We're always looking to be helpful and would love to know from you what we could do to make this as relevant and as useful for you as possible. And so with that, we're going to end the presentation and start the discussion part. And I know we've been getting a set of questions. If you've been seeing a cursor moving around the screen, I think some of you have. Jonghyun has been rigorously going through many questions to try and figure out which ones are going to be most interesting. So hand it over to you and ask away.
Yeah, so I'll start with one of the first questions that came in, which is just what is your definition of cash on hand? And I think that was speaking to that slide where it showed the months of cash on hand. Anthony, would you like to answer that?
Sure. So for Nonprofit Finance Fund and the work we do as consultants and as lenders, we have really come to appreciate the central importance that this has in the ability for nonprofit organizations to function. What we really mean is it's the money you've got available to you that is unrestricted and liquid. So that would be the terms that we focus on the sort of wonky side of NFF. What we basically mean is it's money available to you as a leader of a nonprofit that you can freely spend to cover whatever costs you happen to have the moment you have them. So this is about money in the bank to meet payroll, money in the bank to pay the rent. And importantly, it's often about the money you need to cover the unexpected expense, whether that's a tree falling on your roof and the roof repair guy showing up, or often a delay in a payment you might have been expecting. So when we asked that question in the survey, what we said is it's the money you've got that's, again, it's liquid, so it's available to you. It's not an asset you would have to sell and 3 months later might get paid for it. And it's money you have that's unrestricted. And again, less important what the technical definition is and more important about what it means for you as an organization. It's the money you have available to cover those immediate needs. I think someone else asked a question about what we believe is the right amount of that money to have on hand. Am I right? That
what would reserves cover?
Yeah, so I think we got a question about, well, what would reserves cover, and what percent of an organizational cash flow is practical? This is a question we get a lot at NFF, where we say half of all nonprofits in the United States reported through the survey that you have 3 months or less reserves, meaning that whatever your ongoing expenses are, you've got enough money in the bank to cover those for 3 months. And people say to us, well, what would be optimal? Should we go for 6 months? Should we go for 1 year? So there's really two parts to that answer. The first is, and we're going to sound like lawyers here, it depends, and it really does. It really does depend on the way your organization operates. Are you an organization that's growing? Are you an organization that has regular money coming in every month, or are you an organization that often has to wait 6-9 months? If you're an arts organization, for instance, maybe you're running a theater and there's 2 seasons where you bring in a lot of ticket sales, but the rest of the time you don't have money. How your organization is set up will generally impact the answer to that question. So we don't like to give a blanket answer, and we resist if you've got board members or funders who've got some sort of rule. We would encourage you to push back and say, well, actually, it's not. A ratio is not as important as what this money enables you to do. And this is where I was really struck by a colleague of ours in the Los Angeles office, some of you might know, who ran a small community-based sort of community center nonprofit in LA when she was younger. And one thing she said was, you can come up with all the technical ratios and rules, but the emotional reality of leading a nonprofit or any organization is that if you don't have at least 3 months of your ongoing costs covered, that you know where that money is going to come for at least 3 months, it's very difficult to plan for the future. It's very difficult to see beyond this immediate stress that is associated with needing that money to figure out how you're going to serve your mission by developing new programs. How are you going to partner in new ways? How are you going to invest in some of the work we talked about here, building the ability to prove the outcomes you're generating and manage your work so you can generate more of them for your clients. So the short answer is we don't like rules, but we know from our human reality, if you don't got 3 months, it's hard to be an organization that can see beyond the immediate crisis. For some of you, we would certainly recommend more than that. And again, it depends on the business model you have.
Okay, and then another question we have is, did you learn anything that surprised you this year compared to past year's survey? And I think, Barbara, would you like to answer that question?
Sure, no, I'd be happy to. I think we learned a number of things that surprised us. We're very pleased to see that it's still not an easy road. We know that, but we're seeing what we saw as greater financial resilience. That 50% achieving and 76% achieving, break even or better was really a revelation. Also, the increase in organizations looking to pursue outcomes-based funding, because that's still early days. The response that people had to the uncertainty of the last year was, I don't know if you could say it's surprising, it was certainly striking. We can't underscore enough the tone of resilience of, it's almost defiance that all of you were telling us, we're used to this, we're used to dealing with hard times, and we're going to figure it out. With what everybody was facing and the challenges that we're hearing, I don't think it would have been surprising to hear a more pessimistic tone.
Thanks, Barbara. So we have a two-part question here. First part is that a lot of nonprofits got a surge in donations after the last presidential election. What happens if that doesn't continue as we get normalized to the Trump administration? And then related to that, the federal budget wasn't slashed too much in the federal fiscal year 2018, but big changes seem afoot for the next fiscal year. Do we have the resilience to manage this upcoming risk? Anthony?
Yeah, those are great questions, and thank you for asking those, Robin and Maris. And hi, Maris, it's great to see you on this. On the question about the the surge of donations, again, NFF has been for more than 30 years working with organizations to help you all create more resilient business models and approaches that allow you to sustain your mission over time. And we have seen over and over again, and it's not just, this is the latest way this shown up, but there's often too many times we have seen an influx of donations or revenue. It happened after Katrina, where a lot of federal money flowed into New Orleans. As you said, it's happened with a lot of groups who have received a lot of donations after Trump. It happened yesterday where a great organization in Texas that's working on issues of advocacy put up a GoFundMe and wanted, I think, $100,000 and ended up with $8 million. And I have to tell you, because of what we do, not just with the survey, but in our work, we always get worried when we hear those stories when a lot of other people celebrate. And the reason we get worried is we know that if that money is not managed in an effective way, those organizations will be worse off 5 years from now than they were before. And many organizations are ultimately damaged or even bankrupted by this kind of generosity. So I don't want to be too sobering. We obviously celebrate when the community comes together and says we want to make a difference, and the way we're going to manifest that desire is through donations to nonprofits. But we also know that it can be a real challenge, because what happens is organizations effectively take this money and create a whole set of programs that create long-term fixed costs that then over time, when the money doesn't keep coming, puts a burden on the organization that can ultimately really challenge them. So it's unfortunate that this happens. Obviously, the reason why it happens is because nonprofits are always responding to desperate needs in the community and feel that a need to take this money and use it. So not only is it a worry, but it's also avoidable. I mean, the sad reality is we know what to do. We know how to avoid that. And the most important thing is for those organizations who do receive these windfalls to be incredibly careful in their planning and make a distinction between the revenues they have that are going to be repeatable and reliable versus the revenues they have that are one-offs, and then set up a set of programs and costs that match to that reality. You can't create programs that are going to incur long-term fixed costs with money you're only going to get once. So it's a great question. And again, we know just enough to be worried when other people are happy. And it is stressful, but it's also in the hands of an effective management team. There's set of some simple ways you can manage those windfalls that can really make them both beneficial in the short term and also contribute to your long-term resilience as opposed to undermining it. Again, I encourage you all to go to nff.org, where we've got quite a bit of writing related to these topics with some tools as to how to make that change. And then your question about the 2019 budget, we certainly, as both an advisor to nonprofits, but also as a lender to nonprofits, where we have a lot of loans outstanding, where our repayment is going to be based in many cases on federal governments paying health clinics or schools or homeless shelters and others. This is a question we are very concerned about. After the election, we were very concerned about this for our clients. Like you, we were pleasantly surprised when we got through the 2018 budgeting process without massive cuts to the social spending that ultimately flows through to all the organizations we work with. We're not ever going to be complacent. We are just as worried this year as we were a year ago. I do feel like 2018 was a little bit of a staving off the inevitable rather than a set of victories that are going to make it reliable in the future. So again, we encourage all nonprofit organizations to really plan for the hard decisions that are going to be necessary if the funding sources you've always relied on go away or get shrunk. We certainly know in the lending we do, that's a question we're asking people we are borrowing from. I would say at Nonprofit Finance Fund, we haven't backed away. Like you, as a resilient sector, we have said our response to this uncertainty is to do more than ever. We lent more money last year to more organizations than we ever had in a single year before. So we think you can't shy away from the needs in the community. At the same time, you can be smart about figuring out what would your scenario, do some scenario planning. What would you do in the event that a major funding source gets cut? And I think you also see in this data a recognition that advocacy is increasingly important, that we don't have to just simply take for granted that these cuts are coming. We as a community can say something about whether they're going to happen or not. And I think there was certainly success last year in this community and others joining together to help push back against those cuts. But we would encourage everyone to be really sober in your planning for what you will need to do in the event that revenue sources do get cut, and be prepared rather than dealing with that in a panic. At least some planning ahead of time can help you sort of go through the war gaming and the tough conversations of thinking about what you'll need to get done.
Okay, thanks. Barbara, I have a question for you. Can you give any examples of how the federal government policies and positions to make clients' lives harder?
Sure, Jung, thanks. It's a really good question, and the examples are many. Some of the big themes that we're seeing, especially, obviously in the open-ended responses, the increases in eligibility requirements was cited a lot. The difficulty of reaching people with services when they are afraid to come out for help was mentioned over and over and over again. People who are afraid to come out to get life-saving medications because they're afraid that ICE is waiting for them. We heard from organizations that are tooled to help people who are fleeing domestic abuse and have had to completely retool to help people who are worried that their entire families are going to be deported. And the other thing that we're hearing a lot of is the consequences of what people are saying is just an emboldened and overt us versus them mentality, just overt racism and discriminatory comments that are making lives really difficult. Especially, we were hearing from schools that there were kids who were feeling just threatened, when they go to school just by the tone of the conversation. That's just some of the broader themes. There are many, many other examples, and as I said, they really come to life in the open-ended responses. And so please go and read them on our website, and also get in touch with us if you're looking for any particular comments that may help to illustrate a point you're trying to make.
Okay, thanks. So I just wanted to jump in and just quickly answer some questions that we've been getting. The first one is we've been getting some questions about whether we've asked specific questions on the survey. And if you have any questions or want to see the questions that we asked, just feel free to email survey@nff.org. I will be more than happy to send along a copy of the questionnaire so you can see what we asked. There's also have been some questions about using the survey analyzer that's at NFF or nff.org/survey data. Sorry about that. If you have any questions about how to use it, again, just email survey@nff.org. We'll be more than happy to help you troubleshoot. If you're having any issues filtering by, characteristics like state, organizational expenses, the metropolitan area, and things like that.
And just to add, in addition to the survey tools, as I mentioned, we have done some work at NFF to turn this data into op-eds and other ways to share our story in the media. One thing that has been done in the past that has been helpful is to take this data and make it local and therefore locally relevant for your newspapers. And so, those of you from North Carolina, you could take the survey data using our analyzer tool online, filter for North Carolina results, and then if you have an advocacy issue that you're doing in the local state, often it's more interesting to local media that you've got data that's relevant to your specific state. So we encourage you to do that. And if you find what we have written, where we've tried to take the data and turn it into a story about the sector and what the sector needs, please, by all means, crib our language, throw in your local state or the issue you work on, specific data, take stories from your own client experience where we might have been using other stories. And please do be creative and take those resources beyond the numbers themselves and use them any way you can. In addition to all of the data which is available through the analyzer, we have mentioned a few times that we've got a lot of really interesting quotes. Not all of them are available in a searchable way, but if you've got a specific issue you're looking to highlight, please do email us. We are happy to go through and do what we can. It's a bit of a slog because there's thousands of comments, but we will see what we can to find comments that might be specific and relevant to you. Again, we have offered confidentiality to everyone who made those comments, but I would be happy to provide them to you in a way that at least identifies the sector the organization works in and the state they work in as well.
And hi, everybody. This is Jen Talansky. I'm also part of the team, and I've been listening in. And in follow-up to what Anthony just said, we had received a question about whether we collected some information about organizations that serve in affordable housing. And the answer is no, we did not collect anything more specific about that, but there were some qualitative questions that we asked about the health of the nonprofit sector. And so if whoever asked that question can email us at survey@nff.org, we'll take a look through some of those qualitative answers for folks who serve the housing in housing, that's their work focus, and see if there's anything interesting. We to the questions about whether we collected information about specific metrics organizations are using to measure their impact, we did not collect that specific information, nor about the effects of tax reform or the FASB reform. Thank you to the person who liked our analyzer. This is done on Tableau. And I think if you'd like help going through the analyzer, please do get in touch with us and we can just do an off-screen session with you. And I think we had another question for Barbara.
Yeah, so we probably have room or time for one more question for Barbara. The survey shows that nonprofits are expanding programs and headcount. Is there a risk that funders will think we have all that we need?
Well, you know, it's funny. Several of us had that same reaction. Yes, of course, there's a risk that some funders and some people in the public just generally will think, well, you're doing fine. You know, but we all know that even the nonprofits that are posting surpluses aren't flush. You know, this is a sector that crawls to work on our hearts and not on our bellies. And anyone who suggests that we have all we need and that you all have all you need just really need to be reminded that there are really serious risks to not having enough money to fix a leaky roof, to retain qualified staff and train them as your next generation of leaders, and to not being able to look up enough to focus time and energy on maximizing impact and achieving greater results. So I would say, yeah, be aware of that risk and be ready to answer it.
Okay, thank you. So with that, was it Anthony?
Yeah, I just would like to wrap up. We have 1 minute. We'd like to end this on time. Again, as we said all along, please do share with us if any of this was helpful or unhelpful. We do a lot of these presentations and always appreciate feedback to get better. And most importantly, let us know how you are using this in your community so that we can share your creative ideas with others, both as inspiration for what they can do and as a way to affirm that this exercise and the investment we all make in it is worthwhile. Just wanted to wrap up by saying, you know, what an honor it really is to be able to work with all of you at a time when the stakes are so high for so many communities in our country. I take great comfort and derive the optimism I can find these days from knowing how in every pocket of the country there are committed organizations with people like you who are not giving up, who are resilient, and are committed to a vision of this country in which everyone belongs, everyone's worth is recognized and dignified. And it's a real honor to count ourselves among a nonprofit sector that, at the end of the day, when you look at all of our differences across religious or geographic or political lines, that's what this sector really is about. It's a manifestation of this idea that we take care of each other. We always have and we always will. So it's a real honor to be with you, and I really appreciate the time you've all taken out of your busy days and the stresses we all encounter to hear from us what we've been able to draw out from this community and to find ways to amplify that voice in the communities you care about. Thank you.
Oh, and one more note, just to add, you'll see here that there's the last slide has the link to the outcomes website that we mentioned. It's investinresults.org. Please be sure to visit. You can order a hard copy of the book for free. You can download it as well or read it online. And here also is some information about NFF's webinar series, which basically distills more than 3 decades of expertise and experience into some very accessible lessons. You can see that again on our website and sign up there.
Okay. Okay, thank you again to Anthony, Barbara, and Jen for jumping on. Just as a reminder, you'll be emailed the webinar and a recording shortly after today's session is complete. I really hope you enjoyed the conversation today, and we look forward to connecting with you in the future. Bye.